Atheism is my default setting. I was watching a video recently of Rainn Wilson, who you might know as Dwight Schrute from the US series of The Office. He was being interviewed by Alex O'Connor, a British YouTuber who posts videos containing debates about or discussions of various religious and philosophical topics, and also interviews like this that he does with people discussing these same topics. I'll leave a link to this part of his interview with Rainn below. It's actually part of a much longer video. Now, at one point in this section of the video, Rainn Wilson says, "I tried being an atheist, it didn't work." He says that he tried for years to embrace the fact that there was just stuff. For the record, he identifies as a Baha'i. I think this is a mistake that many people make, namely that if you're an atheist, that means there's just stuff. In other words, they confuse atheism with materialism. They see only these two options, theism or materialism, and they think that in rejecting materialism, you're forced to become a theist. Rainn also seems to think that mystery implies theism, also that recognition of any kind of transcendence implies theism, and again that something not making sense implies theism. He says, "It didn't make sense to me on a grokking emotional level. It didn't make sense to me that stuff just exists." And he associates this with meaninglessness. Now, there are a number of issues here that I'd like to consider. The first is that atheism does not necessarily imply materialism. If you say to me, "You're an atheist, so you must be a materialist," you're just wrong. For instance, I could believe that I have a soul, even a soul that continues to exist in some way after death, but I could still be an atheist. Now, a lot of this will come down to definitions of terms, as it so often does. But I could argue that I have a material body and an immaterial soul or a spirit, but still not believe in God. There's no conflict there. I might even believe in astrology, that in some way these celestial bodies influence my life. Perhaps we conceive of some kind of spiritual essence, a spiritual stuff, if you like, via which these celestial bodies can have some influence on me. But I still don't necessarily believe in God, even if I believe in all of that. I might believe that crystals have some mystical effect on my mood, but still be entirely an atheist. I might be a Jedi and wish that the Force be with you. Still an atheist. Buddhism is essentially an atheistic but non-materialist religion. It doesn't explicitly reject the possibility of gods. They're just not particularly important or relevant. You can certainly be a Buddhist without believing in God or gods. There's no necessary connection between atheism and materialism. I could believe that the entire universe is actually just a creation of my own mind and still not be a theist. In a slightly more grounded sense, I happen to think that things like appreciating art, music, beauty, etc. may be based in material reality, but they can't be reduced to their material substrate. I think that these are emergent qualities that transcend their material basis. If that material basis ceases to exist, then those experiences also cease to exist. But while these experiences exist, they're not reducible to their material substrate. They arise from, emerge from, a certain level of complexity, as does life itself and consciousness. I can understand the world in this way without once having to appeal to a concept of God. This touches on another aspect that Rainn Wilson raises, namely the concept of transcendence. That doesn't have to imply God either. I'm perfectly comfortable with saying that conscious processes, emotion, experiences of the beauty of the world, that all of these things transcend the material basis of reality. That makes perfect sense to me. I would say, in fact, paradoxically, that transcendence is immanent in reality. Material reality possesses within itself the capacity for transcendence. None of this implies a deity. I have experienced all of the things that Rain mentions in this interview. A sense of wonder, a sense of beauty, a sense of mystery. I get it. But none of these things require that we posit the existence of God. I've thought about this a lot, and I wouldn't describe myself as a strict materialist. I think when we use words like only, we immediately introduce a bias into the discussion. Only is a reductionist word. A sense of beauty is only a series of chemical and electrical processes in the brain. Only is added unnecessarily to that sentence, and it represents a bias. It's an insidious little word. It's a lessening word, a lowering word. If I say that something is only something, I'm belittling it. Let's leave out the word only in that earlier sentence. A sense of beauty is a series of chemical and electrical processes in the brain. Sure, fine. I'm perfectly fine with that. But it's also a personal experience that I have. Those things are not contradictory, they're not mutually exclusive. They're different levels of the same phenomenon. Again, I think that people tend to confuse materialism with reductionism. Only is the reductionist position. I don't have to take that step. I can look at a painting as a scientist. I can describe the pigments used, their chemical composition. I can describe the order in which the various pigments were applied. I can describe the direction and force of the brush strokes. I can talk about which chemicals result in which colours. All of that I can do from the perspective of the scientist, of the chemist. And it would be a very thorough and accurate description of that painting. But then I could step back and look at the painting from a distance. And then I might gasp and say, my God, that's beautiful. That experience transcends the information provided to me as a chemist, but it doesn't in any way deny it. My experience of that's beautiful is dependent on the physical, material aspects of the painting, but it's not reducible to it. At least, I don't think so. In contrast to Rainn Wilson, I would say I tried theism, but it just didn't work. In the end, I would say that theism, the concept of God, is unnecessary and superfluous. I can have and appreciate all of the experiences that Rainn describes in this interview without having to appeal to God at all. Adding God to the equation adds precisely nothing in my experience. God represents zero in that equation. I might even want to say that it detracts from or undermines those experiences, but I'll leave that alone for today. My default position in life is that of an atheist. I think I was pretty much born that way. Unfortunately, God didn't play any significant part during my formative years. God didn't really enter the picture for me until much, much later. I tried theism on. I really did. But in the end, it added nothing to my life, added nothing to my experience of the world. It was a big, fat zero. So I returned to my default setting, and it's all just fine.